to argue that people aren't fully living a full life as we think about social media coming on and doom scrolling and how people are getting lost in this next generation of apparently young men not interested in driving, not interested potentially in dating, or declining population. Like, I think there's a lot of reasons to feel that squarely we're in the middle of not having purpose and not having a reason to live. And I think that's very scary.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Trauma, Training and Transformation, the podcast where we explore how movement heals the mind. Today we're exploring the science of longevity, the psychology of aging, and what the latest research might tell us about living healthier, happier and more resilient lives. Joining me today is an entrepreneur, researcher and co-founder of MyVitalC, Chris Burres, whose work has focused on one of the most talked about compounds in longevity research, ESS60, also known as carbon-60. This conversation isn't about self-shortcuts or miracle cures. It's about the curiosity, critical thinking, and exploring where science currently stands. We'll discuss the evidence, challenge assumptions, and ask what it really means to add life to your years. Chris, welcome to Trauma, Training and Transformation. For the benefit of the audience, please introduce yourself.
Well, James, first, thank you so much for having me. I am Chris Burres. I am the chief scientist of a health and wellness supplement company called MyVitalC. If you had asked me, say, 9 years ago, Chris, you are going to be in the position I am today, having written a book called Live Longer and Better, having orchestrated a longevity summit where I got to interview people like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Stephen Gundry, and then even to just have a health supplement on the market, I would have said, you're crazy. I don't know how I'm going to get from that position to here. And I think we're going to kind of discover and explore that today. So I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, Chris. Before we actually talk about carbon-60, I'd like to begin with something much bigger. Why do you think humans have always been fascinated by living longer?
Wow. Well, if you think, what is our edict, right? What are we here kind of fundamentally on the planet for, not metaphysically, but like, how do we just make sure that our species survives? And that is by surviving, right? Like, at least to the point that you have offspring that are going to make it, right? And, this concept that as we age, you can look at aging, I think from an evolutionary standpoint it's not intentional. It's just, you don't matter anymore. So our biology doesn't continue you on, doesn't need to have you there. Some have argued that you actually don't want grandparents around, and this is more in kind of primitive times because they tend to take resources from their children and then their grandchildren, and so there might be some benefit to that. So I think fighting that to be, our drive is to stay alive so that we can have more kids. But, I think as we think about it today, our drive isn't just to be alive, right? Like we're going to talk about this molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life. I share this story with people and they'll say, why would I want to live longer? It's very confusing to me because at a very young age, I can't tell you like why or exactly when, I decided I was going to live to 125. And so when people say, I don't want to live longer, I didn't understand. And then it came to me, it's very clear, people can't separate living older from living in some state of infirmment. And so if you hear the real question, which is, hey, James, in some sort of infirmed state, how long would you like to live? Yeah, it depends, but the answer starts, if it's in some continual decline, maybe not that long. And so I think we're in an amazing time now where the possibility to live longer, a lot longer, and a lot healthier is kind of here and on the horizon.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I mean, there's lots of stuff on the market currently for different self-help tips or medications or tablets or stuff over the counter that people are trying, that easy fix to what they want to achieve. But do you think people are actually afraid of dying, or are they just not fully living the full life?
Wow. Well, to argue that people aren't fully living a full life as we think about social media coming on and doom scrolling and how people are getting lost in this next generation of apparently young men not interested in driving, not interested potentially in dating, or declining population. Like, I think there's a lot of reasons to feel that squarely we're in the middle of not having purpose and not having a reason to live. And I think that's very scary. I think the pills and potions are like, well, you certainly would like to feel better, Right? I think you want to feel better as you're going through this existence, but the data on happiness is pretty clear. Right? The data is you've got to be doing stuff, you've got to be moving, you've got to have some control over your life, and you have to be delivering value to other people. That's where real happiness comes from, and that's what I would encourage people to really focus on.
Touched on carbon-60, and you've spent years putting all your time and effort researching and studying this topic and this molecule. But what first sparked your curiosity?
Wow. Well, the story of how I got involved with carbon-60 really is a little bit of serendipity. Really, my business partner, Robert Wong, whom I met at the University of Houston, was working at this facility on the University of Houston campus called the Texas Center for Superconductivity. And he was actually working in the chromatography office, separating this newly discovered molecule. So just real quick, I'm holding up a model of a molecule for those of you who are listening. Just imagine a soccer ball. You would call it a football. We just had the World Cup. It was amazing. I got to see it. I'm so happy people got to experience America. That was absolutely amazing. Met a bunch of Brits, had a great time with them. This was so much fun. But anyway, so this soccer ball football, if you look at it, think about the lines on the soccer ball representing the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have the spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms, and it's 60 atoms in the shape of a sphere. It was discovered in 1985. The three scientists who discovered it, and they actually discovered it at Rice University, which is here in Houston where we are based, those three scientists went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1996. My lab started manufacturing it in 1991, so a full 5 years before that Nobel Prize was awarded. And the reason Robert and I started manufacturing it is Robert, it doesn't just come in the 60, right? Carbon 60, there's carbon 70, carbon 76. So you have to isolate the molecule. This molecule turns out that it is in fact superconducting. My business partner was separating this molecule at the Texas Center for Superconductivity. And one day his professor came in. This is Dr. Paul Chu, who's incredibly famous. You've never heard of him, but he's incredibly famous in the superconductivity world. And Dr. Paul Chu came in and said, hey, you guys are young kids. This molecule is selling for $6,000 a gram. You should go start a business. And my business partner, Robert, is from an entrepreneurial background. And I joke, he did a back of the napkin calculation, which had one line, $6,000 a gram. And then he was off and running to do this. I joined him because manufacturing this molecule is really challenging. And so at this point, we are the oldest and longest manufacturers and distributors of this molecule on the planet. Very proud to share that. And yeah, that's how I got kind of involved with carbon-60. And I'll share, we think of carbon-60 as an industrial molecule, right? Great for inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, which might make you nervous as you think about a health supplement. Probably nobody in your audience woke up, looked out at their car and thought, I wonder what part of my car battery I should be consuming on a daily basis for my health. But so inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, it's this amazing molecule that evolved with one particular study. It was supposed to be a toxicity study into the molecule with the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. And that's really how I ended up here, even today.
That's incredible. But on that journey, you must have gone through a lot of ups and downs, especially with the research. Was there any one defining moment that made you, yes, this is it. This is where we're going and we can make this work for people?
So very interestingly, I would say that it's less of a defining moment and more of a looking back and going, I could have made better decisions, which may be counter to your question. And I'll give you an example. So this study comes out where Wistar rats live 90% longer than the control group. So again, the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. That comes out in 2012. In 2013, we start getting phone calls from this crazy, wacky group of people called biohackers. And I can say that affectionately because I am now a biohacker. And they were like, hey, that stuff that we saw in that rat study, how much should we be consuming? And what my business partner, Robert, and I heard was, hey, that stuff that you sell to research institutions around the world to put into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that stuff should we be consuming? And we thought the appropriate answer was zero. We actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid-2013. So think about from 1991 all the way to 2013, we don't have not for human consumption on our labeling. And then that ended up in a situation where 2 to 3 times a week, we're getting phone calls from these biohackers. But by the way, I do want to share, it was clear that this molecule was safe in the literature. We were just conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists in inks, batteries, tires, but they just didn't seem compatible, even though the literature, it was clear. So we're getting 2 to 3 phone calls per week. And these calls they're from this crazy, wacky group of people called biohackers. And these calls sound something like Joe would call me and Joe would say, "Hey, Chris, I got to share, my knee pain is gone." And I would share, "Hey, Joe, you mean the knee pain of your rat?" Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And he'd go, "Yeah, hey, if my rat weighs 275 pounds and does HIIT training on Wednesdays and Fridays, should my rat take more on Wednesdays and Fridays?" Or, right? So we knew what was going on. And again, we knew in the literature that it is clear that it was safe, but maybe we didn't have the foresight to know that we should get into this industry. Nothing changed really every quarter. Literally in the room behind me, the conference room, my business partner, Robert, and I would get together and do we want to be in the supplement industry? I think I graciously described the supplement industry as a challenged industry, and it's very different than delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials to research institutions around the world. So we just kept saying no. That changed finally in 2017, but in this time frame, I found a peer-reviewed published research paper that shared that 50% of the supplements on the market that this research group had purchased didn't have in them what they said they had in them, right? This is, again, the antithesis of delivering commercial quantities to researchers. Finally, at the latter part of 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following, that's how things change all the time these days, started sharing all the benefits he was getting, taking the product on a daily basis. At that quarterly meeting, couple things happen. First, we're like, maybe we should have been smarter and started this sooner because it's clearly going to be a bigger opportunity than we realized. Maybe this is the pivotal point, right? We looked back to that research paper where 50% of the supplements on the market didn't have in them what they said they had in them. And we knew that would happen in this industry. We are the oldest and longest manufacturers and distributors of the molecule on the planet. So we knew we have the lab. We've been delivering to the exacting standards of research institutions. And so we understood that we needed to get into the space. And then we asked ourselves 2 questions. The first question is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team here takes it. By the way, not a requirement. You don't have to clock in and somebody make sure you take your shot of MyVitalC. The other question here in the States is we've got the FDA, the FTC. You got to cross the T's, you got to dot the I's, and then we're off and running, presenting this molecule to the public. And I'll share our most consistent testimonial is that people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
Most research uses animals because it passes a lot of the ethical concerns regarding research. So what do you think the fear is of human subjects in relation to research, especially something as important as this molecule could be in longevity, but also healthy lifestyles for people?
Well, there's a reason that we do studies in rats. There's an absolute reason. And when I first, at the beginning of 2018, when I first really started putting on this hat as the chief scientist of a health and wellness supplement company, we have this study in rats. These rats live 90% longer. It is the longest longevity experimental result on mammals. And one of my roles is does that matter, right? Does it even matter that this happened in rats? And it turns out there is a reason that we use rats. And there was this one particular occasion, so my business partner, Robert, we have an office and we share a wall. And I heard him talking to a Dr. Paul Kudabek. He's actually with DePaul University. And they were talking about rat studies and taking rat studies into human studies. And this is something that Dr. Kudabek does all the time. So I ran around over to my business partner's office. I'm like, hey, I overheard you. I have to ask this question. There is a number, right? There is a percentage of things that happen in a rat that do or don't happen in a human. We may never know the exact percentage, but there's definitely a percentage. What is that percentage? I asked Dr. Kudabek. And he shared this story. It's a little long, but I think it's very telling. He says, when a scientist wants to share with you that what happens in a rat does not happen in a human, they often use a particular study of a morning sickness drug. This is a study that no problems were found in the rats, so they gave it to pregnant women. Unfortunately, it had a negative impact on the fetuses. They were born with deformities, and scientists will often go, look, what happens in a rat doesn't happen in a human. But then he goes on to say, if they had looked at the fetuses of the rats, they would have noticed the deformities in the fetuses of the rats, and they would have never given this to humans. So even where somebody would, state, hey, this is how we know that what happens in a rat doesn't happen in a human, they actually looked at the wrong data point. I'll just throw this in because I think it's fascinating, because our intuition about genes is not very good. It turns out we are genetically closer to rats than rats are to mice, right? Like in our little human brains, mice, just a small rat. No, we're actually significantly closer in terms of genes than rats are to mice. So our intuition is wrong about this. And, it's our job. We're actually working to start 4 clinical trials before the end of this year, which we're a very unusual supplement company. Most supplement companies do not do research. Even fewer publish. We published in 2024. 2025, we just submitted a paper for this year, 2026. So, we're in the best possible way a very weird supplement company.
That's great to hear that you're doing that research and give the people the reassurance that all the steps are taken to give the best output for people when taking this drug. One thing I've often think about is that medicine is incredibly good at keeping people alive, but not always good at helping people stay healthy. So when you hear the phrase healthy aging, what does that actually mean to you?
Well, so I did a longevity summit. So uncovering the secrets of longevity. I did a kind of a course and led a group, the Longevity Fast Track. And if somebody comes to me with that kind of limited longevity expertise and says, hey, what should I focus on? I'll be honest, it probably shouldn't start with our product. It should start with the basics. It should start with good nutrition. It should start with good movement, which is really 4 movements, right? It's the things that people don't think about, which are balance, flexibility. Those are movements that need to be incorporated. But it should also be strength training, resistance training, and VO2 max training. So you should be doing those things. You should be focusing on your sleep. The most important thing is having the right mindset. And why is the right mindset the right thing to focus on? Well, if you know you need to move more, and you don't have the mindset to make that change, it won't change. If you know you need to put down the Twinkie and you don't have the mindset to put that Twinkie down, it won't change. If you know you need to stop doom scrolling, put your phone away and get sleep, and you don't have the mindset, that's the first thing to focus on. And I will share that we have great testimonials, and we'll probably talk about this molecule working at the mitochondria, at the level of the mitochondria, at the level of the powerhouse of every cell in your body. And it turns out you have 2 million mitochondria in every cell in your brain, right? That's why our outsized, consistent testimonial is focus and energy during the day, better sleep at night, because the impact that it's having on the brain. We even have testimonials supporting kind of emotional balance when on the product. So I do believe that this product could help you with that mindset, to help you get that energy and focus and reduce that neuroinflammation. It's my belief, and help support those decisions that you need to make.
Many people think aging is simply inevitable, but do you believe aging is something we can influence, i.e. through our genetics, lifestyle, environment, or emergency science?
Yeah, 100%. When I was very young, I already mentioned, I thought I'm going to live to 125. And I didn't think it was going to be very pretty, right? I was going to be a Marine crawl, maybe some sort of death roll over the line, and yay, I made it. And my vision has changed. There's a thing called the longevity escape velocity. And the concept is there will be a point, I believe this to be true, where for every year that passes, the medical community will extend our life by slightly more than a year. And I think that'll get dramatically more. And if that happens, if and when that happens, there will be a last person to die of natural causes. And it's one of the reasons I really like to share, push yourself hard to be as healthy as possible. Hopefully you can be on the other side of that quote unquote finish line. Now, this sounds crazy, right? Because I'm talking about living forever in the context of not dying of natural causes, right? Don't have a solution if you get hit by a bus, jump out of an airplane, in your parachute. We don't have solutions for that, but at least to make sure that you're not dying of aging. What evidence is there to support this? And I think it's pretty profound evidence. In 1950, medical information doubled every 50 years, every 50 years. In 2025, the number was every 3 months. Medical information doubles every 3 months. What that means is at the end of 2026, we're going to have 16 times more medical information than we had at the beginning of 2026. That doesn't even count AI. By the way, AI, it can help you write a paper a little bit faster. Great. That actually doesn't save that much time. What AI can do is something I think more profound. Every day, a great experimenter wakes up and he's got 100 experimental ideas that he would like to try, and he's got a budget for 5. So he uses the breadth of his existing knowledge to figure out which 5 studies are most likely to be successful Also may have some weight with the grad student and what they're interested in, et cetera, but he's limited to these 5. And I believe AI is going to come in and say, those are the wrong 5. Those are less likely to succeed. You should do these other 5 on your list of 100 experiments because they're more likely to succeed and potentially solve multiple problems. Right. So not only are we getting 16 times more medical information at the end of each year, and I think that's going to continue to increase, but the quality of the experimentation that we're doing is going to increase exponentially. And by the way, there's already people working on using AI and automation to actually iterate experiments in the lab where you're like, just run this, make this the best thing you can. And it just continues to make it better and better, better. Like we're going to be blown away by what's going to happen soon.
So let's move on to a little bit of the science as you touched on earlier on. Carbon-60 has generated enormous interest online, but also considerable skepticism, especially with the use of social media, people selling the most up-to-date or the most informed performance and enhancing product or aging product out there at the moment. For someone listening for the first time, hearing the term ESS60, what is it? And why should people be interested in it?
Yeah, and I think we touched on this, right? C60 is for industrial applications is the way we think of it. And there is peer-reviewed published research that proves if you process it improperly, it's harmful. C60 is for inks, batteries, tires, photocells. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for human consumption. It is the process of manufacturing this is incredibly tough. Frankly, if I woke up today and I was like, I want to start a business making a supplement, I probably would not choose this supplement because of the rigors involved. First off, you have to, in order to make the raw powder, you actually have to vaporize graphite rods. Turns out graphite is one of the hardest materials on the planet to vaporize. You need local temperatures of the sun to vaporize graphite rods. You also need to be in a slight vacuum. There can be no oxygen, otherwise that kills the reaction. That resulting soot only has 10% fullerenes, right? So this is C60. These are industrial molecules. So then you have to separate those materials. First off, you've got 10% fullerenes and you've got 90% amorphous carbon junk. You've got to separate that with a filtration process. And then that 10% fullerenes, you got to isolate the C60 molecule. Those take chemicals that we prefer not to work with, but they're the best chemicals for the job. Then now you've got industrial C60. And that's when our process kicks in, where you make sure that you get rid of all of the solvents that were involved in the process, a special proprietary wash. And now you've got ESS60 that is for people and pets.
So where do you feel the research at this moment in time is leading you to? And what do you believe the results will be at the end of the study?
Well, so I'll break this down kind of this way because this does answer the question. People ask me all the time, what might I expect on the product? And we really think of the journey with the product as a 3-month journey, which parallels taking the product in the morning, focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. So month 1, it is focus and energy. And the testimonial that I use actually sent some product to a lady in the UK. She took the product in the morning, recorded her video that evening and sent it in. And in the video, she pointed out that she didn't finish her cup of coffee. Now, if you're a coffee drinker, that's a big deal, right? Noticing that you didn't finish it and, well, not finishing it and then noticing that you didn't finish it really means she finishes it all the time. I used to be a 2 to 3 cup of coffee per day person. I'm now more like a half a cup, maybe 1 cup. It's about the ritual, come in, make the cup of coffee. I love the smell. I love the taste. So that's focus and energy month 1. Month 2 is really about deep sleep. And I believe that sleep is happening and supporting the focus and energy in month 1. But in month 2, my business coach shares that for 50 years, he needed an alarm clock. When he started taking the product, he no longer needs the alarm clock. And, he's got late night mixers, late night business dinners. None of that matters unless he doesn't get the product for about 10 days. And at about 10 days, that's when the literature suggests this molecule clears out of your body. And now we're going to get into kind of answering your question. On month 3, we believe we're reducing the negative impact of stress mitochondria with what's called the boss theory. And if you reduce the negative impact of stress mitochondria, given that there are between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body and 2 million mitochondria in your brain, we start to get on month 3 these systemic benefit reports. And we actually can't share them. We have to do research in order to be able to share those results, which is why we're starting 4 clinical trials. We have already started a frequent and severe headache trial, my own testimonial of wife. Literally, I got a testimonial today. So happy. What this lady shared was, I could no longer train hard because I would get an aura and then these severe headaches that would happen. She ran for 12 minutes for the first time in years, didn't get this aura experience, and it just makes me feel amazing. So we're doing a severe and frequent headache study. The next one is HSCRP, stands for high sensitivity C-reactive protein. It's an inflammatory marker, typically an indicator of cardiovascular diseases and cancers. We have got some great testimonials from a practitioner. And in fact, last year, there was a study in beagles reducing So we're doing an HSCRP study. Then we're doing a sleep study. We already did an ad hoc study. Again, remember I mentioned we're a very weird company. We actually do studies. It was a small cohort of people. The important piece of that sleep study was that 100% of participants reported improvements in sleep when they were on the product. So we're doing a more formalized version of that sleep study. And then finally, we do have a cosmetic product. It's a two-parter. It's a peptide and an ESS60 molecule. We kept them separate because we didn't want to use an emulsifier because emulsifiers are not healthy. Such good testimonials from that. We're starting a wrinkle and age spot study. That's what's driving. And then we'll be able to kind of share what's happening in month 3.
Sounds exciting. And I hope once you get to the end of those studies, a lot of people will be reassured, but equally excited to take your product once it's gone to market. One of the central themes of this podcast is that physical movement can change psychological health by exercise, sleep, recovery, breathing, and human connection. They all influence the mind. But where do you think longevity intersects with mental well-being?
Well, I think that the data is pretty clear from a mental well-being perspective. I already talked about if you don't have the right mindset to do the right things for your health, then that's great. And I just can't stress it. I love this phrase. So not because I made it up, but I did. It's kind of cool. Which is movement is life, right? When you stop moving, there is death, right? There is no life when you stop moving. They have described aging as the relentless pursuit of comfort, right? So I'm comfortable on my lazy boy chair eating bonbons. That's not how you're going to stay alive long, right? So movement is life. Tough movement is freedom. And that is the rigorous training with VO2 max. The data is clear. If you go from a minimal VO2 max to a maximal VO2 max, you have a 400 to 500% reduction in all-cause mortality. Increasing your VO2 max should be something that you're focused on a weekly basis. And then the data on sarcopenia, great indicator of what your life is going to be like, maybe more importantly, but certainly how long your life is going to be. You need to be staving off or actually building muscle on a weekly basis. My kind of prescription is, hey, be sore 2 to 3 days a week. And I'm not talking like sore, I can't, pick up a can of tomato juice or I can't get off the toilet. I'm just talking about, hey, I know I worked out yesterday or the day before. That level of soreness. And you should shoot for that 2 to 3 days per week. And if you don't have the right mentality to make those changes, then you're not going to make the changes. But the data is pretty clear. You look at the blue zones where these are the zones around the world where people tend to live longer, tend to live in they're more centenarians. And one of the key components that's consistent across the board for them is their connection to community. And so I think that's probably a underrepresented feature and goal and thing you should strive for as it relates to longevity and a long health span.
You mentioned earlier on about the molecule and how that can enhance people's cognitive behavior changes and how they recognize that through the study. Exposure to physical health has similar kind of responses and can improve psychological resilience. But how do you think both these do they feel similar in the way that we recognize the symptoms of emotional well-being or how our body responds to inflammation and recovery from stress?
So I think there's a couple things going on here, right? So let me describe the boss theory, right? So there's a couple things that give credibility to the boss theory. First, there's peer-reviewed published research that shows this ESS60 molecule in the mitochondria. Way back in the 90s, it was understood that this molecule, this ESS60 molecule, could hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of the cage. I'm going to get a little geeky here, and then I have a fun analogy to kind of wrap these things up. It's a powerhouse of every cell, lots of them in our body, 2 million in our brain. Like any energy source, there is a negative byproduct. You think about your car going down the road, there's exhaust. You think about a power plant, there's a smokestack. In the case of mitochondria, it's reactive oxygen species. I like to picture these like little bumper cars that if they're left to their own devices in your body, they run around and everything they smack into, they cause rust, oxidative stress, oxidative damage, ultimately inflammation. And that's a bad situation, but like so many biological systems that we have in our body, there's a way to manage that reactive oxygen species. And that's with the internal antioxidants, glutathione and melatonin. I'd like to pause here because melatonin is the sleep hormone. Our most consistent testimonial involves sleep. So there's good parallels of what's going on in the mitochondria. So a healthy mitochondria is producing energy in the form of ATP. That's the energy source your cells use to do their job. And also this negative byproduct reactive oxygen species, which are being managed by glutathione and melatonin. But what happens when you stress your mitochondria? First, that begs the question, how do you stress a mitochondria? I point out, if you're alive in modern society, you have stressed mitochondria. Smoking, drinking, smog, EMF radiation off of your cell phone. If you're alive in modern society, you have stressed mitochondria. And by the way, I'm prescribing that you should be stressing your mitochondria in the form of tough VO2 workouts and in the form of tough resistance training. And when that happens, your mitochondria starts producing more reactive oxygen species than can be managed by the glutathione and melatonin. And again, if they're left to their own devices, they run around and cause all that damage. And that's where the ESS60 molecule comes in. Again, peer-reviewed published research shows it to be in the mitochondria. We believe it holds onto up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage, so they can't run around like little bumper cars and do damage. And then when that mitochondria can replenish the glutathione, replenish the melatonin, then it can manage them appropriately. And again, that's why we say we believe we're reducing the negative impact of stressed mitochondria. So now the fun analogy, I don't know about you, I feel like all biological analogies should start with Mardi Gras. I mean, a lot of biology happens at Mardi Gras, so why not? So it's the end of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. You've got a bunch of drunk reactive oxygen species run around on Bourbon Street, smashing windows, spray painting cars, and you've got the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and the melatonin, come on to Bourbon, handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. But what does the New Orleans Police Department do when they get overwhelmed? They take those reactive oxygen species and they put them in a paddy wagon. They attach them to the exterior of the ESS60 molecule so they can't run around and do damage. And then when the New Orleans Police Department can replenish the glutathione, replenish the melatonin, then they can handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that is why we say that the ESS60 molecule is the boss of buffering oxidative stress system. So this all supports your brain. This all supports as you're challenging yourself physically to have this buffer in your mitochondria, then you're reducing the negative impact of that effort so that you can recover faster and get back to the training again. Because we all know kind of consistency and pushing yourself a little bit harder the next time is the key to improving VO2 max, which can have a 400 to 500% increase in your reduction in all-cause mortality and also your muscle strength, so you actually have freedom.
If people wanted to live 225, I don't think Mardi Gras is going to help them as much as movement and freedom would help. Stress has been around for generations, but however, in recent times, it's been quite focal in people's lives, be it work-life balance, pressures of finances, coming out of COVID. It's really put a lot of pressure on people's lives where stress then has been a big burden, young and old. But however, if you look at chronic stress and people looking at wanting to live longer, do you think this has a massive impact on the aging process?
Well, chronic stress absolutely has a massive, I mean, they talk, there's a word called inflammaging, right? Which is this confluence of inflammation and aging because so when I became the chief scientist of this health and wellness company, right? One of the things I wanted to look at was why did these rats live 90% longer? So I looked at the medical community, and the medical community, they don't all agree. That's how science works, but they tend to think of it as an oxidation and an inflammation process. From an antioxidant perspective, there's an ad hoc study showing our product to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's peer-reviewed published research showing it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So I'm in Houston, Texas. We put a big old check mark next to antioxidant. When it comes to inflammation, I know it's true here. I think it's probably true over in the UK that the governing bodies equate conversations of inflammation with the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging. So arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So if I come on your show and I share that we address inflammation, what the FDA, in the case of what the FDA in the case of the United States hears is me claiming I cure cancer, I cure cardiovascular disease. I'm in fact not claiming that. We have a lot of research that we need to do in order to be able to make claims like that. But the FDA here in the US will allow me to say that we address inflammation, at least as it relates to exercise-induced inflammation. So we have a kind of a partial check mark there. Now, that inflammation, key driver of those diseases already, those are the diseases of aging. There's already a theory. So a lot of people believe that if you address cancer, right, if we cure cancer, we're going to dramatically extend the life of humans. And that's actually not true. I think the data somewhere, if we cure all cancers, we can extend life by 5 years because the next disease of aging comes in, whether it's Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease, the next disease of aging comes in. So I love what Dr. David Sinclair's focus is like, let's do research on aging, which ultimately does mean inflammation, chronic inflammation, because then we can solve the problem that is the key indicator for all of these diseases of aging. Again, I think we're going to be on the other side of, diseases in a lot shorter period than we even can imagine.
There's many people these days struggling with some form of mental health, and it's quite common knowledge where stress is carried and held in the body and people don't know how to release it. So if someone was listening to this podcast today, how would you recommend they reduced psychological and biological stress tomorrow? Where should they begin?
Yeah, I think the data is pretty clear that movement is a great reducer of stress. When you look at people who, may be depressed, they do a placebo-controlled study on exercise. And I don't know exactly how you do a placebo with exercise, but right, because you're either doing it or not. But they'll do that with the medications that are classically prescribed for depression and exercise. And exercise does as well or better, right? Meditate, right? To some degree. We're not talking about hours of meditation. We're like, just sit quietly, get some meditation, YouTube video, 5 minutes only if that's all you can commit to, and meditate. The other one is move. And if that's just 5 minutes of walking, I always like to share the habit is significantly more important than the accomplishment. The accomplishment is the habit. So if the thought of going out for a 30-minute walk, especially I know it's hot there, it's also hot here. If that thought of going out for a 30-minute walk causes you to not walk every single day, then your goal needs to change. It needs to be reduced to a 5-minute, whatever the walk is that you cannot say no to. Now, hopefully you do that and maybe you start expanding it and maybe throw in a little bit jogging. But the most important thing is that you're doing the physical thing every single day. If you address some form of meditation, some form of being quiet with yourself, also breathing techniques can fit into that, and movement, that will have a significant impact on what you're experiencing.
People are bombarded daily with the new product on the market, especially around anti-aging or physical performance. So how can people listening to this podcast distinguish the difference between good science, the science and research that your company with yourself are doing, or clever marketing?
Well, unfortunately, the answer is not easy. You have to roll up your sleeves more and dig in and look at, is there an actual peer-reviewed published research paper that's supporting this? Are they driving research as an organization? And this is where things can come of value. Like your podcast can be of value because people can lean on you for having done the background work, through an interview like this. Find that expert that you trust that seems to be addressing the actual data, and then you can lean on them. But I would still suggest you need to roll up your sleeves. I interviewed a guy, Dr. Tom O'Brien. He wrote the book, The Autoimmune Fix. Fascinating guy, fascinating interview. In his book, he talks about you need to spend 1 hour per week on your health, right? Where you just isolate yourself. You're reading some book, you're reading maybe some papers, you're making some changes in your house. Get some plants in your house to absorb the toxins in the air. Get rid of the plastic utensils and replace them with wood, your plastic cutting board. To make these changes in just 1 hour a week so that you can continually, it's the kind of law of one. If you just keep improving things 1%, in this case per week, then you'll be dramatically improved by the end of the year. So I think you need to dig in and do some research to understand where does the research actually point you towards, and then spend some time and see if you get to, like, I'm one of the owners, and some people may resonate with me, some people may not resonate with me, but make sure that you do resonate with the person who's making the product that you think is worth trying.
In all your years of research, have you ever changed your own mind based on the new evidence that's emerged? And if so, what's that taught you about yourself as a scientist?
Man, I'm a big believer that you should defend your position, whatever the position you have, with a lot of passion. And then you should be very, very comfortable giving it up in an instant. Right, as soon as you have new data. There's I quoted it in my book, where it was a testimony in Congress, and this congressman asks this expert, "Hey, you used to think this, and now you think this. Like, what's up with that?" And then the response was, "Well, when I get new information, I change my mind. What would you have me do?" Right? Like, if you get new information and you don't change your mind, like the new information is a waste. So I think you do have to make decisions with the limited information that you have today, and you do have to be willing to make changes in those decisions for tomorrow. I think I've been pretty good at that. I'm pretty certain I wasn't very good at that as a teenager. I really remember thinking about everything as being black or white, and then struggling to kind of flip-flop. But now I have this understanding that there's a gray area, and like, it doesn't matter how convinced you are of something, new data should be able to change your mind.
20 years from now, even 50 years from now, what do you think the breakthroughs in longevity will be like? And what excites you the most about the advances in this field?
I'm super excited. I think that in 20 years, we will solve aging. I think it could actually be shorter than that, given the exponential nature of AI. And then now we'll just have a whole new world of things to address. And then you throw AI and robotics in it, and like, this can take over we're in for an exciting ride. Like, it's not going to be super smooth, I don't think. I think there's going to be some really challenging times, just like there always have been in dramatic. But I'm excited for the genetics works that can be done. Like, they're already doing gene alterations. I interviewed Liz Parrish, arguably the most genetically modified human on the planet. Right? She's doing technologies that will eventually clear out of your system. So she's not doing kind of CRISPR technologies on her existing DNA, but doing taking protocols that will adjust DNA for certain time periods. It's exciting what's going on, and that's going to continue to get.
I remember the Rocky movie where Dolph Lundgren, the Russian boxer, and you had two conflicting training programs. You had Rocky in the snow, in the shed, doing the old-fashioned techniques, and you have Dolph Lundgren tied and connected to machines and doing all the high-performance training sessions with that. Do you think the old stuff is going to come back, rejuvenated, or do you think the Dolph Lundgren style is the way ahead?
Man, if you look at the training that they're doing, we just watched the World Cup, right? They take their shirt off at the end of the game, and they're wearing a bra, right? They're wearing a sports bra that has sensors in it. That is not going to go away, right? So you're doing tough, hard workouts, right? Both of them. But the data is going to drive you to how much. And we have a clear understanding, I think a better understanding now, that recovery is the most important piece, right? You should push yourself hard. But I just saw a video the other day of, probably, an elite marathon runner, and he was talking about zone 2. So I played soccer, semi-professional for some short period of time for 25 years. So tough training is just like everything I knew. And when I keep seeing these articles that zone 2, right? Zone 2 is, you can have a conversation, is the thing you need to be doing more of. I just struggled because it's not working out, right? It's moving, and it's moving brisker than just a walk, but it's not working out. And it just took me a while to accommodate to that. So with the data that we've been able to collect, we're actually learning more about how important recovery is. And so Rocky, great for the movies, but he needs a sensor on him if you want to optimize what's going to happen.
People want to live healthier lives. Often people live maybe 125 years, but there's potential poor, healthy lifestyle there. But in your research, what have you found to be the biggest misconception when people talk about aging?
Well, at this point, right, and we are at a crossroads. when I share with people that this molecule extended the lives of test subjects by 90%, and they share that they're not interested in living longer. I think the misconception is that you have to live in some sort of state of infirmment as you age. And I think that the advances that we're going to see soon will make that not be true. We have all seen and in our brain, we're like, oh, that's one 71-year-old who can still do pull-ups and push-ups and is jogging. And I just had an interview with a guy kind of late 60s who just came back from snowboarding, right? Like these are things that we see but we don't think are possible for us. I think that's the misconception. It is possible for you. It takes effort. It takes work. I'll never forget. I read this article in Men's Health magazine. The title of the article was, "As You Age, Your Metabolism Slows Down." And I'll tell you, the title of the article pissed me off, right? Because I'm thinking I'm going to live to 125. How is this even going to be possible if my metabolism is slowing down? And then it was like, I don't know, a 5-page article. And it was just like example after example after example of no, your metabolism doesn't slow down. You slow down. And if you slow down, your metabolism slows down. And then all of this research, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, as they started to move more, their metabolism sped up. So your metabolism is tied to how much you move, not your age. I think that's a great example of like how people get it wrong, and they just need that mindset change so they can get out of that reclinal chair, put down the bonbons, and make life and a lifespan and a health span happen.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I mean, the name of this podcast is Trauma, Training and Transformation. And I started this podcast because I know if I needed to speak to somebody, I didn't have that person. I didn't feel I had the confidence to reach out to anybody, and I suffered internally with my own demons. It continues to this day, but thankfully I can reach out to people and have those conversations. And sharing knowledge, lived experience and expertise, especially from someone like yourself, can help people resonate with that journey and maybe use it as a tool to grow in their own life. But when you look back at your own life, what has transformed you the most? Not professionally, because I think that's evident with what we discussed today, but personally.
So I am very lucky in so many ways, like just so many ways. But one of my best friends, his name is Patrick Wanis, he's an Aussie, is the most amazing therapist that I can. He's also a human behavior expert. He's on the news regularly or whatever, but he is an amazing therapist. He created a process called the subconscious rapid transformation technique, where you're addressing what's holding you back, what the big T, little t trauma, and then letting it go in one session, right? So in one 90-minute session. So I attribute a lot of my success in business to my friend Patrick, a lot of my success in my relationship with my wife, to the work I did with Patrick. By the way, he's had conversations with us together, but mostly he's working with her on her stuff and separately working on me and my stuff. And then I attribute a lot of the success of my relationship with my children to the efforts and things that I've learned from therapy. So I think, there is a litmus test that I have for therapy if you need therapy. And that is, we'll do it in the context of, well, if there's anything that you want to accomplish, right? And it's reasonable, right? So you're not talking about flying without wings or whatever, and you've given it enough time, and you haven't accomplished it, you've got something inside of you holding you back. And that's when I see that in myself, that's when I schedule a session with my friend Patrick. And again, I'm just lucky. He works with leading NFL defensive guys. Like it's amazing who he works with, and he happens to be one of my best friends. So that is a thing. Find a great therapist, not just a good therapist, not the therapist. Find a great therapist, because I think there's a lot of value in really digging deep and addressing what is holding you back.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. It's quite powerful, and I'm sure people out there, it would resonate with them too. You've spoke a lot about this molecule and your research. For the benefit of the audience, can you just give a bit of detail of if they're interested in the product or want to find out a little bit more, where they find you, how they can connect with you? I'll ensure that I share all these details within the description box when I finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So I made a URL for your audience. It's called myvitalc.com/trauma training, right? So we just list off the transformation, but the first two words, trauma training. Let me walk you through what happens there, because there's some freebies. There's as high as a 40% discount. This is not available on our regular website. First thing, I did a longevity summit, interviewed people like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Dr. Stephen Gundry, I asked everybody for tips and tricks for a long health span and longevity. And I compiled the 18 tips that just kept coming up and up. So there's 18 biohacking tips. You can get that for free. Just need your name and your email. Next, there's a coupon on that page that gets you an additional $15 off on those things on that page. As you scroll down, you'll first find our olive oil product. So this is a high quality extra virgin olive oil with as much of the ESS 60 molecule as we can get to dissolve in it. The typical serving is 1 teaspoon per day or 5 mils per day. We've got specials on 2, 3, and 6. The deepest discount, up to 40%, is on 6 bottles. The reason we're doing that discount on 6 bottles is the thought process is I kind of shared, we think of it as a 3-month experience on the product. So maybe you keep 3 for yourself, give 3 to somebody who would actually benefit from a 3-month experience on the product. Or you could do what I would do. I would just selfishly keep all 6. You have that right to do that. We also have a discount on subscription. It's additional couple of dollars. So the 2 bottles come every 2 months, the 3 every 3 months, 6 every 6 months. Take advantage of that subscription, even if you're only going to do it once. Our customer service team has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google. They're not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. They're trained to help you, and they do an amazing job. It just turns out most people don't cancel that subscription. As you scroll down, I did mention our Skin Reduo product. We've got amazing testimonials about that. So the next thing further down is what we call our inside and out. So why take care of the inside if the outside isn't looking amazing? It's a 2-3-6 situation. Go on subscription. As you scroll further down, something I'm very proud of, my book, Live Longer and Better, is available on Amazon for $19.95. It's available at the bottom of this page. For $10 extra, I will autograph the book for you. 100% of that $10 fee goes to Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember the movie The Sound of Freedom, which is an amazing movie about a horrible topic, which is child exploitation. The Operation Underground Railroad is what that movie is about, and they're doing a great job kind of wiping that off of our planet. Should never have been there. So 100% of that signature fee goes to Operation Underground Railroad.
Chris, thank you very much for sharing that detail, and I'll ensure that it's all added in the description box below. Thank you for joining us today. Whether today's conversation leaves you inspired, skeptical, or simply curious, I hope it reminds us that something important. Science doesn't move forward because people stop asking questions. It moves forward because they keep asking the better ones. Longevity isn't simply about chasing birthdays. It's about creating life with more health, more purpose, more connection, and more moments that truly matter. The great investment we can make isn't just living longer, it's living better. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find this on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, or on my YouTube channel, James Alder 003. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review, and share it with somebody who you believe might benefit from the conversation. This show helps us continue breaking down stigma around health, resilience, and human performance through evidence-based connections, stations, and science. Until next time, please remember, the quality of our lives is measured not by the number of years we are given, but by the courage, curiosity, compassion in which we choose to live them. Every journey towards transformation begins with one decision: to become just a little better than we were yesterday. Thank you for joining us, and see you on the next one.